Hey everybody, it's me. I'm back. Welcome. It's Sunday morning, and so I thought I would do another stream. Looks like we got a few folks here. We got Cody, we got Grumpy Old Slam, we have Mage's Musings. Hey guys, how's it going? Um, so yeah, just kind of jumping on here. Let me adjust my camera a bit to just sort of shoot the shit and talk about what's been going on. So, yeah. Kind of a bit out of sorts this morning. Sorry, guys. It's actually been a pretty good couple of weeks. Had some interesting developments in my hobby life. I actually managed to get back in to my brother's weekly game and showed up last week and played way too late on work night, but I had fun and it was a good time. Good group of guys. Weird though, because so they're about 9th level in this campaign, and I came in at about 3rd level originally, and then it wasn't working for me at the time, so I stepped out. So I'm coming back with the same character, 6 levels later and a lot of campaign later, and it's really an interesting. I'm glad my character has been gone during that time, and I'm not expected to know what's going on. Because I'm as clueless as my character. So sorry about that. Had a bit of a frog. So yeah, that was fun. I spent a lot of time sitting there scratching my head as they're trying to put pieces together in their campaign. It's very, very story heavy campaign. They've got a lot of links and connections to their characters and a lot of background that's been going on. So I'm playing catch up along with my character. So there's that. Let's see. Let's see. I did get another book in my quest for getting the Roll Aids books. This time I got the Wizards one. I mentioned this on the last stream that it was on its way. It finally arrived. This is actually a really cool looking book. It focuses on mythological and literary wizards, and and wizard in a broad sense. But what's really cool is each chapter is dedicated to a particular wizard. Gives a big bio piece on him, gives AD&D stats, or the reasonable approximation thereof, because this is Roll Aids, and so of course everything. It's not 100% D&D. And then it will give an adventure for each of these characters. So each of these is really designed to be played with the particular wizard. But I mean, you could easily drop them in. So it starts with Gilgamesh, who I don't necessarily remember being particularly wizardly, but hey, I'm also not a Babylonian scholar. So, and so this is really cool. They also offer illustrations of the characters, so it's pretty cool. Why is that? Because I need to mirror my screen. Just a moment here. Why is my screen mirrored? I don't like to mirror my screen. There we go. All right. And so you get Gilgamesh and some art. Like the rest of the Roll Aids products, it is very text heavy, but not in a bad way. And then we have a stat block for Gilgamesh. They have him listed as a 15th level fighter, 5th level magic user, 5th level cleric. So yeah, mostly a fighter. Let's see. And then there's an adventure in here, Gilgamesh and the 7 Genii. And so then it has some cool intro, some information on the city of Uruk. And one of the things I do like about, if I can get this page to turn, I do like about Roll Aid's books is they have nice, clear, but effective maps. So you have this map of a small dungeon. Let's see. And lots of journey and adventure. And then like you got more maps. Actually, it says Jenny in here, Jenni. So I'm assuming that is a early Babylonian thing. And then the second chapter is Merlin. We have Merlin in there. So then we get some introduction. We get stats on Merlin. What do they have Merlin listed as? Profession, magic user. Skill level, not applicable. Saves as skill level 12 magic user and skill level 10 druid, whichever is better. I really do like a lot of the early third-party stuff where they were really, because D&D was not necessarily broad and expansive in its specific terms, they often had to shoehorn characters from myth and legend and stuff. We then have Morgan Le Fay. I dig the full body portraits of the characters, so that's really cool. And we have stats for Morgan Le Fay. I'm sure we do. Let's see. Or do we not? I don't believe we do. That's what? It seems like a ripoff. No, I guess you really guess we don't. I wonder if she's in here as a monster. I haven't had a chance to read through this extensively, so you're kind of flipping through this with me right away, or as sort of a first look sort of a thing. Yeah, I think that's one of the nice things about old school art on Dirty History and Hobbies is that it was understated, and I feel like in its imperfection and its lack of color, it really allowed the imagination to flow, and it let us fill in the blanks. It maybe inspired at this as much as it did. Here's Morgan's stats. She's in the back here, evidently. Interesting. They have her listed as a half elf. That's an interesting choice. I mean, she is supposed to be part Fey blooded somehow. They have her as a 10th level cleric, 6th level druid. That's an interesting choice, also. Not a wizard. Then we start getting into the fictional characters, or the literary characters. We have Shadowjack from Robert Zelazny. The Jack of Shadows, also. Let's see. And again, we have an adventure for each of these characters with these nice maps. Simple maps, but effective maps. And they vary in style and quality. I mean, this one has a lot of shading and stuff, and some of the other ones were very linear, very technical. Looking through this particular adventure, so far I've seen in a few rooms, we've got spiders, an Umber Hulk. Let's see, a bunch of Sturges, a fire elemental. An earth elemental, rust monsters. Dang. All right, so Jack of Shadows, a character I am not familiar with. as far as his literary origins. They have him as a 12th level wizard and a 9th level thief. That's interesting. Sir Carolinus. This is another guy. This is from the Dragon and the George. He is a 12th level wizard. Oh, I forgot to show the illustration of him. I apologize. Carolinus. 12th level wizard. So this is cool, kind of cool. We get a menagerie of monsters from this particular author, a Dixon Menagerie. It says monsters that populate the world of S. Carolinus. We have simply dragon, not red dragon, black dragon, anything like that. That's cool. I didn't realize they had done a Goblin Slayer TTRPG. Is that based on the manga Goblin Slayer, or is that something else? Interesting monster here, a watch beetle. It's just a beetle art. And then we have English wolves. Interesting. The English wolf is probably related to were creatures, but has no human form itself. That's funny. I have never really run into that monster before, and in one of my campaigns, I had these creatures that were effectively canines that carried lycanthropy and therefore were more intelligent and evil, but they didn't change. So yeah. Mere dragons, cousins to the dragons described above. They tend to be barely more than half the size of a true Dixon dragon. And then we have sandmerks. Sandmerks are some sort of rat creature. I do find it interesting, though, that while we had the monster art associated with the particular stat blocks, we also get a page of just the art, which is kind of cool. Oh, that's cool. They have Az and Skeeve from the Myth series by Robert Aspirin. So that's cool. Those are literary characters I am familiar with. Cornfield Slam. Yeah, I'm sure. Plenty of places want to take that credit. So Az, they have him written up as a 9th level fighter, 10th level magic user, and Skeeve is a 5th level magic user. It's kind of cool little snippets in here. Talks about the stuff that Skeeve actually knows. Mythified they have an adventure in here called Mythified. It's interesting because each of these adventures is done in its own internal format. They don't share the same formatting as far as and that's interesting. So it's like they were all written very independently and then combined into this book. So that's kind of neat. Adept of the Blue Star, Lethandi, Miriam Zimmer Bradley. So we have another literary character. It's very cool because also I'm noticing here at the head of each of these sections, they give you a table of contents for each of them. So each subsection has its own table of contents. So it has the character stats, and then it has the adventure and where they're listed. So that's neat. So the Book of Secrets, an adventure written by 3 people who have no relevance to me, so I won't bother naming them. Let's see, we have Lethandi is 5th level fighter, 10th level magic user. Rumfield Slam. What are you referring to as far as the magic system? Are you talking about the one in Goblin Slayer, or I'm not sure what you're talking about specifically? These are some interesting maps. I think those shaded. Oh, and the story of Lethavi. Okay. Yeah, I'm curious if it actually talks about that. That's kind of cool. In here, it introduces some new spells under her: Melt Metal, Tell True Gold from False, Sphere Outside of Time. Well, it's basically Time Stop. Some of these are just reskin spells. Place which is not, and emergency vehicles going down the street. We have Werewolf in here, which is also associated with that story, evidently. Map of a keep. It's cool. That's cool. So it looks like her adventure is maybe one of the base. Something big must be going on. We've got lots of. Well, I have a major thoroughfare that goes right through my street. Well, not a thoroughfare. It's basically a big long straight street that cuts across the neighborhood, and so the EMS vehicles all run up and down the street. We get new monsters in the Lethandy section. We have swamp squeakers, unintelligent fungus parasites. We have quips, very minor demons. We have tripids, unintelligent plant carnivores. And then we have bane wolves, lycanthropes. And then it looks like the last wizard in the book is another folkloric mythological one. We have Circe. Oh wow, she's got divine intervention tables as part of her table of contents. So what are her game stats? Let's start with that. They have a human to animal polymorphing chart, which is interesting. So characteristic of the adventurers and what animal they turn into. So if they're gluttonous, unmannered, and lazy, they turn into swine. If you're obstinate, stubborn, and lascivious, you turn into goats. If you're pretentious, snobbish, and foppish, you become peacocks. Unprincipled, devious, and sly, jackals. Opportunistic and cruel, wolves. The meek, the followers, sheep. Thieves, conivers, weasels. Conivers. Yeah, the conivers. You ever hear? It's one of those words I don't think I've ever actually seen spelled out. I know the word. Let's see. The frightened and cowardly become rabbits. Those with poor hygienic habits become skunks. The ungainly and unattractive become mules. The easily influenced become swans. And then the stupid, dull, and boring become oxen. We then have a really interesting section here on divine intervention tables, which I think this might be good to be lifted for any campaign. It's kind of cool. You divine intervention table, you roll to see if, So it varies from no interference to God affects the actions of one player, God affects the actions of 1d6 players, God affects the actions of the entire party, God or gods affect the actions of the party. So you can actually have multiple gods intervening. And then the roll of 100, God controls the party directly for 1d6 turns. So the party actually loses its agency for 1d6 turns as they are puppeted by the gods. There are devoutness modifiers. That's kind of cool. Interference type table, ranging from beneficial or advantageous interference all the way up to fatal interference. Roll once per encounter. Effect duration table, anything from 1d6 hours to 4d6 hours. Beneficial intervention table, +1 to saving throws. Prime weapon becomes +3. Prime stat raised to 19. This is pretty involved. Variations for magic users, druids, and clerics. Neutral interventions, non-beneficial intervention, direct intervention table, fatal intervention table. This is really cool. And then Circe stats herself. She is a 12th level magic user, 9th level druid. And then we have an adventure written for her, which is pretty short, but then she had like several pages of divine intervention stuff. We have a map of her island and her villa, palace. That's cool. Let's see. Circe's daughters. Circe has 129 daughters and granddaughters. Of this number, 42 are under the age of 13 and will seldom be seen except for Area 3. That's interesting. Yeah, this is definitely some old school stuff because the random chart that you roll on for Circe's daughters has percentages to determine these three things: magic user skill, druid skill, and appeal. It's a very old school attitude. Hey, these woman characters, these female characters, all that's important is their ability to cast spells and how good they look. Or their charisma, whichever you want to interpret that. I find that amusing. A sign of the times. Oh, and then we get a map of the Hall of Heroes. That's kind of a cool map. I think that's something you could easily lift for any campaign. Let me see if I can get, so we got a drawing and then a map. So let me see if I can get a better look. There we go. Get my fingers out of the way. That's a liftable map. Let's see. And party of 9 dark trolls. Yikes. A minotaur. 4 displacer beasts. Large patch of a strange weed. Under the weed patch is a cross-guard portion. Oh, so there are portions of a sword hidden in these different rooms. That's kind of cool. A giant polar bear. Polar bear by itself is normal. Do we really need a giant polar bear? Let's see. Magic armband. So yeah, this is Wizards. This is one I was not familiar with by any reputation or anything in the past. I picked it up. Found a good deal on it. So I did grab that one. I did just yesterday score a very affordable copy of Dragons, which will be Dragons is one of the ones that was done in partnership with Grenadier and their Dragons series of boxed models, miniatures. So I'm eager to get a hold of that one and see how that looks. That'll be the first one I have owned that is one of the Grenadier tie-ins. I've had access to that one in the past, so I am slightly familiar with it. Looking for a copy of Giants as well, which was the other miniatures tie-in that they did. Yeah, Grumpy. Because the largest land predator is just not big enough. Exactly. So yeah, yeah, I don't think I've ever seen Wizards in the wild. And so that was one of the I really picked up sight unseen and very unknown, but I'm very happy with that. I think it exists in a similar space to the Deities and Demigods book, in that it is bringing characters that we know into game stats, especially the original Deities and Demigods, the very first printing, where it had all of much more of the literary aspects in there too, where you had the Nalon myths and the Cthulhu myths, and the Melnibonian myths, characters in there. So that, yeah, definitely follows that similar vibe. Um, there is a lot in there. One of the things that I really like about the Rolaids books in general is that they are very, very much full of stuff that you can just lift for your campaigns. You have maps that are very universally useful, like that Hall of Heroes or Circe's Palace are so ingrained in the fabric, that kind of Greek architecture is so ingrained in the fabric of fantasy that I feel like you could throw it, Circe's Palace, I could throw that into my By the Sword campaign as the villa of some leader or some affluent person in the setting. Yeah, it's just really good. But also the adventures are small in these and so easily pulled out and thrown into another campaign. Let's see. The Posies. Yeah, so yeah, I'll be showing dragons when it comes in and as it continues. I want to get more of the adventures. So far, the only one that is specifically an adventure that I got is the Chinese themed one that I grabbed. And again, useful, but there are so many other ones. They even have a couple of solo adventures, which is interesting. Not my thing, but I mean, I could easily see they're worth picking up. There's some of the books that are clearly rarer or much more sought after that I'm not sure I'll ever be able to own because we're talking about books that get up into the $100. And unless I just score a real big, super good deal on those, I'm not even going to bother. Yeah, so that was that. Another thing that I have been doing that it's been a feel good part of my in my thing that's happening in my brain. But basically, I used to love computer RPGs, whether it was Ultima or Adventure Construction Set from on my Commodore 64. Later on, playing the Gold Box, Pool of Radiance, Curse of the Azure Bonds, and then later on, even like the Baldur's Gate, stuff like that. But also things like King's Quest, and I used to like those games a lot. So I watched recently a playthrough, or not a playthrough, but like a review / introduction to Solasta. Solasta evidently was a kickstarted game, CRPG, that is done very much in the spirit of Baldur's Gate. This came out before Baldur's Gate 3 came out. And it is a computer game that faithfully recreates the 5th edition SRD in a computer game. And I'm having a really good time with it. It's very well done. It's got good voice acting. The dungeon maps are very fluid. Very few load screens and cuts between different areas of the dungeon. And then they're very interesting. It's definitely high fantasy, much more in the 5th edition style, but there's a lot. The reason I'm mentioning it here is I'm finding that as I'm playing it, it is getting my juices flowing as far as the DM goes. I'm seeing very interesting battlefields and seeing how the three-dimensionality of the battlefields work. An Apple II RPG. So they made a modern day RPG that feels like one that was on an Apple II. That's kind of cool. Dirty Histories and Hobby. I don't know what engine it's running on. I don't pay attention to things like that really. All I know is that I'm having a good time with it. I'm playing through the campaign right now. It is neat that it is a faithful recreation of the SRD for 5th edition. So you have skill checks in there. In a recent encounter, one of the enemies cast flight on himself and was flying, and then I was able to firebolt him and break his concentration, and he fell, took falling damage. That's really cool. They've got rest mechanics in there and stuff like that. So as somebody who plays 5th edition, I think it's neat. The other thing that's very interesting to me as a GM, specifically a DM for 5th edition, is the adventure. This is showing. It's really interesting because I'm taking away stuff, and seeing how to make some of these encounters more effective and dangerous in 5th edition. Because in the game, you start out at first level and you work your way up through the levels through XP. And so I have managed to have characters drop many times in this game. And so now, to be fair, to be sure, a computer RPG is never going to be the same and have the same level of crazy thoughtfulness and strategy that, say, like living players are going to have. So I have to keep that in mind. But one of my biggest complaints with 5th edition for a while has been that it's very hard to actually drop players. Now, granted, my characters in this computer game are all at those early levels before they have a crap ton of stuff. So it's been a while since I've been there in my 5th edition games, but even around 9th level, the players in the characters in my campaign are really hard to take down. Recently, it happened when they all got caught in a breath weapon, but it took a breath weapon attack to really get them to that point. But I feel like I think it's safe to say that if you are a D&D player, whether you're a player or a DM, playing computer RPGs is good. Prior to picking this up and playing it, I have been playing Caves of Qud, which is a weird post-apocalyptic sci-fantasy sort of a thing, very low graphics, but crazy, wild, and interesting. That really got my juices flowing. Yeah, and exactly. So, and some of the stuff is interesting. Like, I just got in the game. I don't want to spoiler it for anybody necessarily who's planning on playing it. Also, I do recommend it. When it came out, there are several adventures for the first Solasta, and now Solasta 2 is getting released with a big graphics upgrade and stuff like that. So it's definitely worth checking out. But like, I'm going through this magical library at this point in the adventure, and there is some puzzling going on, like computer RPG style puzzling. But at the same time, I feel like this is the sort of thing that computer RPGs probably borrowed from early abstracted board gamist dungeons. Things where you have to push pieces into place to be able to access other areas, or you must go trigger a rune, several runes around the dungeon to be able to get to another place. This is something we've seen in tabletop dungeons well before the onset of CRPGs. So it's a feedback loop, but it does visually represent those things in a really great way. Because it is a story-heavy game that is acted out and dialogued and stuff, there's a lot of really cool just hints and nods to how you can frame your own adventures. I will say this is minor spoiler, but oh well. The way that the game does the tutorial, it's brilliant. It starts with your four characters, your four PCs meeting in a tavern. Surprise, surprise, right? But each of them then tell you, as they're waiting for their quest giver contact to show up for the meeting that they've all met there for. Each of them is telling a story, and each of those stories, you play through it as a solo run for each of these characters, and each of these stories teaches you a part of the video of the game's mechanics, the computer game's mechanics. It's a brilliant way to do a tutorial and also have that nod to a classic start for RPGs. You all meet in a tavern. It's really good. I really enjoy it. There is a crafting system in it, not in a super heavy duty World of Warcrafty kind of way, but you do find things along the way that allow you to make stuff. Like you can get poison glands from spiders to be able to make poisons for your weapons. Or I found an axe that it's like a prime axe or something like that. And if I can get the right stuff, I can then activate the enchantments on the axe. So it's things you can learn to use in your campaigns, your tabletop campaigns, that I don't think are too computer gamey in their nature, and certainly can enhance your adventuring experience. I mean, you can give a player a magic sword, and it can be a magic sword that does stuff. Or you can give a player a really good sword that then could be more magic, or could be magic once they're able to go through other little side questy things to be able to activate that. So that, excuse me, my eye is bugging me. In that way, you can hand out magic and sort of mitigate the magical arms race by having players have to go through various things to be able to activate them. So Cody, as far as Nox Archaist, I would like some more information on that. It sounds interesting. So yeah, so Solasta is definitely worth checking out. I had seen it ages ago, when it first came out. It was Kickstarter originally, kind of cool. And I hadn't realized that there were several adventures and expansions made for it. And it does look like it even has a dungeon maker in it. So looks like you might be able to actually, I don't know how it works. I haven't tried it. I just jumped in and started playing the campaign. So yeah, that's kind of what's been going on with me gaming wise. I got to play with my brother and his group again, and I'm planning on continuing that. I did not get home and into bed until like midnight, which was kind of rough. I'm not a spring chicken anymore. Staying up till midnight playing games is probably not something I want to do too regularly, but it's definitely something that I can do once a week and survive. Let's see. Yeah. So, as far as the load locations, it's even better from what I saw in the new Solasta 2, like it should be. I mean, Solasta came out originally in 2022, so like 3 years ago. So we've had 3 years of advancements in programming and experience, and but it's really good. I mean, if you enjoyed Baldur's Gate, the original Baldur's Gate, or the new Baldur's Gate for that matter, this game has a very similar feel. And there are times where you will end up controlling more characters. Like your party is 4 characters, which is the sweet spot as far as 5th edition is considered. But there was a scenario where I got 2 NPCs that went with me, and I got to control them, which was cool. And so that quest was I had to replay it because I I had let my party resources dwindle enough to where I could not revive a dead character, and one of the NPCs that was critical to getting through the scenario died, so I had to replay it. But yeah, it's neat. The I find that like the variety of when you run into the encounters, the variety is pretty neat. Like I had a spider encounter that had at least two different kinds of spiders in the mob of spiders. Um, and I think based on the location we were at in the game, um, it was supposed to represent the effects of residual ambient magical energies on these spiders, on these giant spiders. So we're facing off with again spiders that had different abilities, which was pretty cool. Um, the the primary enemies in this adventure has different levels of creature, like any good creature, humanoid slash creature should. Um, yeah, I mean, I'm sure it's been done. I know one of the cool aspects that of love him or leave him, but with Critical Role and Matt Mercer in his campaign, he did the cool system of magic items to where they had three different levels of activation. Like you had the basic attunement, and then you had the like an awakened form, and then you had like their final form. It's a cool way to do magic items. Also, I in the past have tinkered around with having magic items that actually get better as the player as the character wielding them gets better. And I feel like I think this why Matt Mercer did that in his campaign, but also why I remember tinkering around with this is that the problem quotes one of the things that happens in D&D often is this recycling of magic items. Like, all right, I got my +1 sword. And then you're good with that, but that +1 sword is only good for so long and eventually it becomes pointless. Um, Probably not as much in old school D&D, like in AD&D and BX, because they are so low power, that +1 still counts a lot. But once you get anything past third edition and beyond, um, having abilities that having your magic items get better as you go up in level is certainly advantageous because then they stay relevant. But also just in a game setting, the lore wise, that can be a cool way to do it. I feel like rather than giving your players a never ending churn of magic items, finding um, yeah, Derek, I was mentioning that Celeste 2 is coming out soon. Yeah, it's in early access right now, I think, um, or maybe even just demo release. No worries, man. Um, but yeah, I think there's something to be said for giving your players magic items that matter or that are interesting. I know in my games, I tend to try to make every magic weapon something rather than just whatever item happens to be around there, at the time. Um, it's I try to give them names and backgrounds and lore. Actually, speaking of which, I'm gonna go grab a book because this is something that I found is really cool. But I know this is such great showmanship. It took me a second. I was going to grab all 3 versions of it I have, but I could not find my original one for back when I was in grade school, which is actually missing pages and badly. So I had it in grade school. I had this. Now this is a original printing version that I bought for my collection. Wondrous Weapons from Judges Guild, which is still available in a new format, which is cool. It does not have any of the color illustrations that the first one had. The first one was mostly black and white with some color, the original version. But the neat thing is it is just page after page after page of magic weapons. It specifically focuses on weapons, including 1 or 2 that are wouldn't seem like weapons immediately, like the Pebble of Pounding, or the Moon Petal, which is a tiara, which is actually works as a boomerang. So really cool stuff. So this is a book I very much recommend for old school gamers. I and my friends used this extensively back in the day. In fact, there were sort of fights over who got what weapon in here, because because there are some really nicely drawn weapons. Also, interestingly enough, all this modern gamer stuff with magic shops. Huh. There's one in here. This book is originally printed in 19 dinosaur days, but yeah, 1982 originally. And then this is a 2021 reprint. But yeah, there's a magic shop in here that sells weapons and stuff like that. So the neat thing is up front we get some maps of the shop. We have a lot of extensive information, universal explanations, format on the formatting of the weapons. Okay, this is the cool thing about each of these. So every one of these items has a background attached to it. It has a history. Every item in here is unique. So the Pebble of Pounding, it is not intelligent. It is neutrally aligned. Properties: increase size and velocity as it approaches target. Command words: grow, pebble. Command words: grow, pebble fly, shrinks, pebble down. Glows green if foes are within 100 yards. Teleports user 10 miles distance on the command word pebble 2. And then it's got a history, and then it says information. The neat thing is that for DMs, this is perfect because it'll give you this whole background bit, and then it'll tell you, like at the end of the Pebble's origin story. I'm not going to read it all off, but it says this information will be sold for 100 gold pieces. There's a set of magic nunchucks, nunchaku. It says the monks live in a castle in the Lenape lands. This information will be sold for 200 gold pieces. So it's a really useful book. You get a background, often including, seeds for an adventure, information that help you with like the quest giving and the lore and the lorification. This sword here, Whelm, this one here that looks like the Conan sword. That was one of the ones that we fought over, left and right. The Whelm is a +6 to hit, +6 to damage, returns when thrown. Everybody wanted a sword they can throw. But yeah, it says reports indicate that the Whelm was last seen in the possession of a warrior mage on his way to Thunderhold, the Dwarven city. This information will be sold for 250 gold pieces. This is really cool. Is it actually there, or is that just a step in the quest to find the well? It's really, really just such a useful book. And then it has weapon creation charts on the back. So, something to supplement and try a different way, utilize it in a different way than, the DMGs and stuff like that. So very much, I mean, it's got polearms, it's got bolas, whips, boomerangs, throwing sticks. It's got travail. I actually have this in my campaign. It's a freaking magic pocket knife, basically. It can fold out a blade in 3 different sizes. It has all sorts of abilities. We got magic flails, we got magic crysknives, we got magic guitars, quick strike, this throwing dagger, beautiful fantasy art dagger. I love it. It's not intelligent, it's unaligned, it's a throwing dagger. It does a lightning bolt strike of 2d6 when commanded, and its speed is 3 times that of a normal dagger. Now, that's the short properties list. Usually in these in the body of these items, there's more details. For example, on quick strike, it says quick strike, a lightning weapon releases a 2d6 charge when commanded or when thrown. The charge is ranged 120 feet. Its secondary power is exceptional speed of the dagger. Once thrown, it travels at 3 times the normal speed of a pitched weapon and never misses its target beforehand. In combat, it will take precedence over most missile attacks and possibly clerical or magical spells. So, I mean, really cool stuff. But yeah, it's what I mean. It should be no surprise. I mean, this is a Judges Guild book, so I mean, Judges Guild is quality stuff from the past. The original book is this. It was a very magazine, comic book formatted, staple bound, color, kind of 3-color, 4-color, front and back. The new version is perfect bound, blue bound, with all of these same original artwork, but all done in this subdued brown. I cannot recommend this book more. I've been using it since I was in 4th grade when I got a hold of my copy originally. So yeah, I mean, it's continued to wither away in my collection of where my original version is missing several of the outer pages because it was so used and abused. That is true. The old Judges Guild stuff did have a tendency to be thin. I'll pull this one up. I can tell you though that this book is not thin onion skin paper. There's the interior of the original. It is quality paper. So this is not perhaps the same as some of the early Judges Guild stuff. So this is definitely, let me see if I can get it back into the bag without damning it. I don't normally keep things in the bag, but because I like to use my stuff, but like almost every one of the Rolaids books came shipped in a bag. I'm sure that's because the people who are selling them are also making sure that they're preserved as well as they can until they can be sold, and they know that they're selling to potentially good collectors. But I like to use my stuff and don't like to hide it behind plastic barriers. So I was thrilled to discover that this book is still available through the Judges Guild. Really good stuff. But yeah, it really made me want to, when I picked this up, it really made me want to pick up more. I just kind of lost the plot on my original. It does have several advertisements in the back for other things that are still available. And if you go to thejudgesguild.com, you can still see what they have available. Book of Treasure Maps, the Island books, the Temple book. Been watching some great reviews of the old Judges Guild products on a YouTube channel that I can't remember off the top of my head. But so yeah, hold on. What happens when you accidentally click on the YouTube on your YouTube window and start playing it? Oops. But so yeah, what else have I been up to? I've been tinkering around with writing some more scenarios here and there. I've got my 5th edition campaign that I'm running tonight. I'm looking to do some one-shots or short shots on Mondays. I have Mondays off and pretty much free and clear. And so it's a good day for me to run games. I know a lot of people are going to be working, but I have to imagine that I'm not the only one with a weird schedule where I have Mondays off. Right now I'm working on getting players together for a Call of Cthulhu one shot. I have talked with my players on the By the Sword campaign, and it's very possible that will come back. But more so in the style of, very much in the style of how the source, the inspirational material. Hey, Brian, the inspirational material was written. It was very, very much serialized, often took place with each book very much being, each story being very much its own thing without a lot of tie-in together with the previous stuff. And I think that By the Sword would probably run better that way. Very much in this, honestly, in keeping with a lot of old school D&D style where, the module that you're playing explains how you got there and why you were there and sets up your motivations and stuff. And you can piece that together over time through sort of meta plotting and threading if you wanted. But I feel like that's a way to keep that campaign and that world going without necessarily getting bogged down in trying to play the filler material between the adventures, which I think is where it started to grind down. I mean, I was still having fun, and I'm sure the players were having fun, but it was one of those things I don't think for a streamed game that necessarily works great. And so because when you're streaming, you want to kind of keep it on task. But yeah, so I'm trying to get back to running some of those games and running some new stuff. I need to run non-fantasy stuff. So Call of Cthulhu is on the line. I do have some other campaigns I'd like to try running. I have like a Marvel game I want to run. I've got 1,000,000,001 campaign ideas. It's just a matter of time and players. But yeah, so looking for doing some stuff on Mondays. So that is a thing. So hopefully that will happen. But I'm going to start with specifically this Call of Cthulhu one shot, and then we'll see if I can get the players for that. That'll be with pre-gens more than likely, because it's just easier to do. And by one shot, I mean we'll play that one scenario and then be done. So it might be multiple nights depending on the pace of the one shot. It's not a true one shot. That's why I often call it a short shot, because but yeah, so yeah, I mean, not a lot else going on, but definitely more than I have been. And I'm definitely feeling a little bit better about things in general, mental health wise. Yeah. So we've reached that hour mark. And so if anybody has anything that they wanted to ask me about anything we talked about today, or any questions in general about gaming or my ideas, my thoughts, whatever, go ahead and throw them out there. And then if not, I'll close out the stream. But yeah, the Rolaids books are definitely giving me something to talk about for sure. Because I mean, these are books that I loved in the past, but I didn't get a chance to get a hold of a lot of them. But the ones I did get a hold of were so influential on my play that I just sort of wanted to check out more of them. Enough so that I have basically I have saved searches on eBay for them. If anybody's interested in Wizards, looks like right now there is a decent quality condition one, like basically the same condition as mine, on eBay right now with a starting bid of $3.99 with $5.99 shipping. So if you're looking at if you want to grab a copy, scoot on over. I got mine, so have at. There's also a copy of Dragons on there that's not in the greatest condition, but still very useful at $7.50 for an auction. But so, yeah, there's so many. One of the ones that tends to be pretty pricey that I want to try and get a hold of is Undead. As I'm looking through here, Undead. Here's what the back of Undead has to say. Let's see. As molten fire spewed from the fissures of the earth, the Lich Lords, led by Nightbay, sent hordes of his skeleton legions over the blasted lands. He could claim this place and the dwarves that inherit it for his own evil rule. Travel through the vast lands and battle Nightbay's armies. Undead is a reference work that includes an adventure for 4 to 6 players, characters skill level 6 to 9. So yeah, it says includes new magic items, new magic and monsters, features maps and detailed descriptions, and the land of the undead for days. So yeah, it's a good one, but it tends to run about the $40 to $50 range. One interesting one that you can find occasionally that is that Rolaids actually had an officially licensed interpretation of The Keep, the movie The Keep. Yeah, I think that's where it started to break down. In a tabletop campaign where we're meeting frequently, and I think it would work fine. But yeah, I think it was definitely a way to go. Read throughs might be a problem. Reading for longer periods of time, I tend to stumble with issues with my anxiety and my dyslexia. So maybe not. I can do some thumb throughs and some little bits and blurbs like I did today, but if I start reading too long, eventually I start stumbling. Let's see. Let's see. Yeah, Marhockman Rolaids. Rolaids is a line of works that were put out by Mayfair Games in the 80s, the mid 80s. Well, you know, it gets into everything. Well, I mean, if this is a genuine question, I am not overly great with that. I mean, honestly, I don't like pushing players around. The best suggestion I've ever found and the best solution I've ever found for it is to just sort of make the world believable and persistent. And so if the players have things that they should be doing and they're not doing them, have it bite them in the ass. And not in a mean, punitive way, but just in a very believable way. If there are things that need to be done and they're not doing them, well, then the things that if the things they were trying to stop, those happen, and then they have to deal with the fallout on that. Or if it's not if it's not very much a yes or no situation, then their inactivity certainly can have an effect on outcomes. So like maybe the evil doesn't necessarily happen, but it's harder for them to deal with when they get to it. Well, I mean, I think the success or failure of sandboxes relies on player buy-in. And this sounds like such a cop-out, and unfortunately, it's like most gaming problems. It comes down to players and DMs. So the DM has to frame the campaign properly and make sure that the players understand what it's about. The players have to be willing to buy into that. So it's sort of this dual thing. The GM needs to keep things moving. The DM needs to keep things. And this I say GM because you can sandbox in any sort of game. If you're not giving solid leads for the players, they're not going to really bite onto them. But you also have to have players that bite on those things. You have to have players that are there to play the game. I've never understood players of RPGs who want to sit at a table and not play the game. I mean, I'm not saying that they should leap at everything in stupid and irrational ways, but I feel like quests given are there to be taken, and players should be willing to take those quests and follow those out. Now, that doesn't mean that once they take the quest, they can't think about it and plan and plot. That's to be expected, but they do need to take them. I think breadcrumbs. So breadcrumbs, much in the same way as red herrings in tabletop games, don't work as well as we like to think that they would. Throwing red herrings, I'm going to start throwing red herrings into mystery campaigns, for example, is just bad form. Players will create red herrings on their own, and you throwing in intentional red herrings is actually just sabotaging your game. Similarly, if you're breadcrumbs are great, but much like the breadcrumbs in the not titular, but in the story that we take that from, they often get eaten by the birds. And in this case, the birds are everything else that's going on in the campaign. And so instead of breadcrumbs, I tend to drop big, shiny, juicy loaves of bread that are undeniable and really do demand the player's attention. Yeah. And this is what I like to say, what I like to call, the Bilbo principle. You have to be willing to leave the Shire. Bilbo has to leave the Shire, or none of that stuff ever happens. The ring stays in Smeagol's cave until Smeagol dies. Eventually, or some goblin finally managed to overpower him, and we end up with a goblin with the ring. Let's see. Let's see. Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. I mean, gearing up, I think in a case where if you're doing, a lot of that stuff can be done between sessions too. True. But I will say this, that even the best GM, the players will always find ways to run off. You have to be willing to, you have to be flexible as a GM. You have to be rather, agile when it comes to your plots. I don't like quantum things where you move things, but redirects are a thing. If the quest you have involves a group of bandits, that the players are supposed to go to the bandits and deal with them. You don't move the bandits when the players go out of their way. You might have the players get attacked by said bandits as they're journeying to their latest distraction. Or you might have the bandits, have them return from their adventure to find out that the bandits have raided and scoured their home base. Or they run into the victims of the bandits on the road, or people leaving the area. Maybe there's refugees. It's got so bad that people are just fleeing the land and going elsewhere. That's the way to handle that stuff. Absolutely will happen. Let's see. So I would stay away from reducing and stick to rewarding. I find that with players, carrots are better than sticks. And so, I mean, if you're playing a game that has an honor system, fine. Definitely utilize the honor system. If you're tracking factions in your campaign setting, then definitely refusing quests or hesitating on quests or not taking care of quests in a timely fashion might reflect poorly. One of the things I like in Solasta, for example, is the campaign, the game, the video game, but we'll call it a campaign for all intents and purposes, starts with the players being deputized by the kingdom as actual agents of the kingdom doing things. And so as I've gone through the game, I was surprised. I didn't know this was a factor in there. There are factions in play. There's a group called the Scavengers, for example, and my decisions in the game have increased my standing with the Scavengers. And so that is another way you can motivate your players and reward them and penalize them if you need to in your campaign setting. Is quest givers are generally people of influence, and even if they're not directly influential, the populace of people is still influential in its masses. And so if a peasant, if there's a call to action through some, like grassroots source rather than a lord or a cleric or something like that, then the people will definitely be the faction that the players and their characters are dealing with. So you can certainly reflect it in that. Well, yes and no. I mean, that really, I guess, depends on the time frame involved. I don't think your villains, your enemies, should ever get better any faster than player characters can, unless, of course, we're dealing with like a Raiders of the Lost Ark or a One Ring kind of a scenario where there is a powerful MacGuffin that is out there that is going to give the bad guy a boost in power. And that doesn't have to be an item. Perhaps it is a political aspiration. And so if we do not get this information to the Lords of Blah in time, then Dark Lord Snazzy Pants over there might actually be able to sway the Lords of wherever to his cause, and thus he gains a boost. I mean, I'm not going to tell you how to run your game. I tend to keep mechanical aspects of my games transparent. I don't want my players to ever have reason or cause to believe that I am taking advantage of them in mechanical aspects. I would definitely not necessarily telegraph any sort of story-based penalties. But yeah, I mean, I think that when it comes to the mechanics of the game should be above board and transparent. I feel that they run better that way. Everybody's mileage is going to vary. I don't tend to do a lot of hidden roles as a DM. The only time I really might hide roles is, for example, like encounter roles and stuff like that, where I don't want the players to necessarily know that they missed an encounter, whether they dodged an encounter or an actual encounter and it just didn't happen, for like traveling random encounters, stuff like that. Well, a player who won't go into danger really just needs to not play. Unless he is effectively playing a cowardly character who ultimately gives in. Look at Malik from Conan the Destroyer. It's a good idea, a good way of playing, or, like Arthur from The Tick. Arthur from The Tick is, kind of a coward, but he always manages to do the right thing and get himself involved because he's devoted to his friends, or he's afraid of being left behind, whatever. Yeah, I mean, I think there are certain players. I struggle to have a lot of patience for players who don't want to play, because not going on quests is effectively just agreeing to not play the game. It's like sitting down at a chessboard and deciding you're not going to move pieces. It's you're just deciding not to ahead of time. Now, if you want to play your character in a way that is cowardly and hesitant, but ultimately does the right thing because, well, they need me, or these are my friends. I can't let them go alone, sort of a thing. Or if the players want to play that out, and the player who's playing that character wants to concede that yes, their character is going, but wants to play out the dramatic beats of the other heroes in the story, talking them into it. See the reluctant hero, not necessarily the cowardly hero, but we've all seen the character who, like, oh, I did my time in the wars, and I'm not going. I can't. I'm not about that life anymore. And then they talk him into Rambo. Um, um, well, and that's the sort of role that I would roll behind the screen. Um, again, you know, I, my advice, no advice in general, is really universal. There's always going to be exceptions. I just feel like I don't feel like there's any real reason to mechanically penalize a player and not let them know about it in meta terms. If a monster has some special ability about him that makes him harder to hit, you're not going to tell the player exactly what that is. That stands to reason. It's more the meta mechanics that I have a hard time putting behind a wall. But that's just me. I also don't like secret squirrel stuff in my tables, so. Yeah, and this is it. I mean, for example, I don't tell players the armor class of a monster. They will eventually figure it out because if they're paying attention. Because if they roll a 10 and it doesn't hit, and then they roll a 13 and it doesn't hit, and they roll 16 and it hits, then they roll 15 and it hits, we're running out of numbers, right? So, yeah, exactly. I feel that there are times when it's important for the player. Again, it's more the meta mechanics. I would not feel right penalizing players in a meta way without letting them know. I feel it begins to take steps down a slippery slope towards the adversarial DM. I feel that it is, for example, the honor mechanic in AD&D's Oriental Adventures. The positive and negative aspects of honor are spelled out clearly in the rules. The player makes choices with full awareness of those rules, and so does not get waylaid at some point mechanically for not realizing that what they were doing was penalizing them. I prefer to keep that. I prefer to express that in story elements and in as opposed to the meta mechanics. I feel that a player is less likely to have an issue with both the situation and me as DM and the ruling if it comes from the world and not from the dice. Now there's some back and forth there. So, yeah, I mean, I feel like so here's the deal. If you are going to mechanically penalize them, but you're going to do it openly, I don't think a lot of players are going to have problems with that. Just like with the honor rules from AD&D, because they know what they're getting into. Also, they've expressed it. It's been expressed to them in the moment. I feel like we've all played board games where we're like, for example, Grumpy pointed out, the do not collect $200. We've all played those games where part of the fun is screwing up. See also Galaxy Trucker. If you've never played the board game Galaxy Trucker, it is the most fun you'll ever have having your ass handed to you. If you've ever played Galaxy Trucker, you know, and if you haven't played Galaxy Trucker, try to see if you can find a copy of it, because unfortunately it's out of print. But it is a game where you're on a wild ride, and even though your ship may be falling apart as you go on your run, it's just an exciting, fun ride. You're fully aware of it, even your own mistakes. Like there have been times where I didn't pay attention to my ship build, and right off the starting block had half my ship just fly off into space because I didn't connect it properly. There have been times where I've had my ship so poorly constructed that one hit in the wrong place sent half of my ship careening off into space. And I'm using that as an extended metaphor, but I mean, yeah, I mean, I think penalizing people mechanically when it's above board, much differently received than secret behind the scenes die modifiers and stuff like that. I think players, like you said, they might get cranky, but they'll likely still be doing so in a good sport, kind of fun and game sort of a way, as opposed to being blindsided when what they think should be working isn't working and they don't know why. If it's a story reason that they don't know why, that's different. You know, going to a different plane of existence and finding out and learning that your spells don't work the same way that's plot and that's story. You know, there's a section in my campaign setting that my players haven't run into yet. If they ever go there, they're gonna find that it's a bad place to cast certain kinds of magic. Certain kinds of magics don't work the same way there. But yeah. No, and so, and I'm not telling you you're wrong. I'm just, kind of providing a counterpoint there. Also, if you're stating here like that, they don't always know that forces are arrayed against them. Yeah, I mean, if you're talking about the world itself, sure. But I don't think it's fair or even realistic that somebody's ability to do things changes because they make decisions. I mean, at least in the mundane functionality of their existence. If I am a carpenter and I'm a jerk, I may have fewer customers, but I'm still probably going to be just as effective of a carpenter as I was before. I just don't have customers. If I'm a bad person, I may not have friends, and I may not have allies, and I may not necessarily progress in my career aspirations. But I'm probably still as good at my job as I ever was going to be. Even if I, I feel like there's a fine line there between what kind of penalties you're throwing at people. I would not, for example, punish somebody on a to hit or casting ability or anything based on their willingness to go on adventures. And I may be misunderstanding. You said on the hero points aspect. So if you are indeed using some sort of meta currency of hero points, luck points, something like that, yeah, I could see that being a fair way, because those are things that aren't core to the functionality of the characters. Those are bonuses. Those are spiffs that they have that I could see the fates eroding their ability to push fate, and so that's different. Um, well, and that's true. I mean, just by the very nature of it. I mean, I think that this is something you can express in the campaign setting itself. A adventurer who is hesitant to go on quests, first of all, are the other party members going to be accepting of that character? I think there's this intrinsic fallacy that the player characters are automatically understanding and accepting of one another just because they're a party. And to a degree, that is true. But I think it is a fair cop to say that a party of characters who has one character or two characters or however many characters who are always grinding against the flow of the party, those characters are going to be asked to leave. You know, in an in-world way. I'm sorry, but you're a coward. We don't want you to go with us. You're no use to us. We'll find somebody else. And that's an in-world solution. And of course, the player character who's playing that character really is going to have to suck eggs at that point. And they're going to have to deal with some sour grapes because they're really just reaping the reward for what they have chosen to do with their character, how they've chosen to play the game. That's a very abstract question, Mara Hoffman. I mean, how many drow are actually going to be up there adventuring in the first place? It's that's a bit off in left field. We're talking more so about player choices with how they conduct their character. I think that it is fair to say that if a player is playing a drow in your campaign, and your campaign is a place where drow are mistrusted, then the other player characters are going to be untrustworthy, and it is going to inform the role play between the players and the rest of the world. Well, and so yeah, but at that point you were talking about the same thing that I was talking about, which is story and in-world repercussions. A cowardly party may not be given an opportunity to go on a quest, but at the same time, is that something that party is even going to know about unless it's actually a situation where they've been called to like a bid session or whatever and actually see the job go to somebody else? I mean, are they going to care also? I mean, is a group of players who have decided to play cowardly characters, and I can't imagine an entire party of cowards, but for the sake of the argument, if you have a party of coward characters, are they even going to give a shit? Is that really going to be an effective deterrent to their behavior? And also, is this really much of an argument to begin with? Because what are the chances that you're even going to be playing a game with a group of players like that? I mean, is it a realistic argument to begin with? Because I feel like if your party is cowardly to begin with, what are you playing? What are you actually doing? What is your campaign to begin with? Do you even have a game? What are you talking about specifically? I mean, another out of left field comment. I mean, talking about your drow, or are you talking about cowardly characters in general? I think it's safe to say that a party who has a character, who has a particular member that doesn't pull their weight, is less likely to be willing to grant them a lot of consideration when it comes to dividing treasure. Um, you know, I know, for example, most parties I've been in have an equal split uh, across the party as far as treasure goes, and that's under the assumption that each of them is doing their best to participate in the adventure and to fulfill a quest. Well, so again, I don't feel. I mean, I don't feel that that's really an argument even worth having, because at at what point are you playing with an entire group of players that don't want to go on adventures? I mean, it's I'm not trying to be too argumentative, but at the same time, it really does smack of a purely hypothetical situation. One player, two players, problem players in the party, that all happens. But as a player of the game and as a DM of the game, if you sit down with a group of players and they aren't ever wanting to do anything, are you really going to stay and play with those people? Why worry about coming up with ways to correct their poor behavior in the game when you can just as easily leave and find people who actually want to play the game? Yeah, I mean, it's a similar thing with like the lone wolf characters, the edgy, the edgy lone wolf style character. Most people who want to play those characters, the Inspector Gadget, the Inspector Clouseau, the lone wolf, the coward, don't understand how those characters work in the source material that they're pulling from that inspire them to play those characters. Well, yeah, I mean, yeah, you're going to end up with one game before you give up, but that's my point. Is entertaining discussion and debate over how to handle a group like that is there's really only one way to handle an entire party of players that don't want to go on adventures, and that's just leave, find other players, because those guys don't want to play the game. But going back to Derek's point, Adric Storm, my buddy Derek, those quirky characters, and I will call the lone wolf edgelord character a quirky character. They work in literature and movies and TV because on a meta level, they're still team players. They're still team players, and they still actually have an author who is driving them towards success and participation. Their character of being a bumbling idiot or a coward or a lone wolf edgelord is just a veneer over the top of a character who is truly looking for inclusion and success and adventure. Wolverine is a classic example of a lone wolf edgelord that people want to use. Is still a team player because he realizes that despite his desire to be a lone wolf, he's better off when surrounded with people. Batman knows that he is only as good as the people he has around him. He has a support network. He goes on heroic quests because it is what he needs to do. Let's see. No, Inspector Gadget is not a lone wolf. He is a solo operative. Those are different things. A lone wolf is somebody who believes they don't need other people, or wants to be alone. Inspector Gadget is an operative of an organization who operates by himself because he has abilities that allow him to deal with situations on his own. So he is not a lone wolf. He is a solo character. He's a solo operative, but that's a very different thing. Lone wolf is more of a characterization and personality type, as opposed to, it's not just about operating alone. And yeah, you can do that. I mean, there are certainly games that'll allow it for it. I mean, you can even play D&D 1v1. I have done it. It can be very satisfying. It does say it takes some tweaking by the DM to make sure that the opponents that the character is dealing with are not overpowering. Certainly, you're not going to run, for example, a lot of ghouls against a solo character, because one bad die roll on save versus paralysis and that adventure's over. But yeah, I mean, and Call of Cthulhu works perfectly well with solo characters, and I've run solo Marvel games before, and I mean, you can do it. I think the key thing is, though, is that, we're talking about whatever veneer that the player puts over it. It really comes down to players who don't want to play the game. And a player who doesn't want to play the game really has no business at my table. And personally, I mean, I'm not going to jump through hoops to try to make a player who doesn't want to play the game play the game. I have other things I need to do. I have other players at the table who deserve my energy much more than this non-participant. I'm going to ask that person to either change their vibe or leave. And I'm not going to feel bad, because they're the ones who initiated the problem. Now, that's different than somebody who doesn't understand how the game works. They might be new. They had a character concept that they wanted to play out, but they don't quite know how to play it. That's when you have, for lack of a better term, coaching sections with your players. And you talk to them and ask them, find out what it is that they're actually after with their character, give them suggestions on how they can play it. A player who genuinely wants to play in the game and wants to do things, but doesn't know how to express the character concept that they have, is much different than a player who just simply doesn't want to play and wants to be disruptive, whether he's the loud, obnoxious player, the conniving, sneaky player who keeps everything from other people and is stealing their stuff, or the player who doesn't want to go on the adventures. They're all obstructionist players, and they need to be gotten rid of. They're not useful at the table. I'm not sure to what you were referring. All later appearances were in situations where killing, not killing, were a judgment call. Yeah, I mean, I think that, yeah, I mean, I don't know there's not much more to really say on the topic. I mean, I guess at the end of the day, how much effort and time do you want to put into somebody who really doesn't want to play the game is really what you need to ask yourself. And I would say the right amount of time to put into somebody who really isn't going to commit to playing a game is just about none. No, if it's clear that they just want to sit back and not play, be rid of them. Because you have other players that really want your time and energy, and they're the ones who deserve it. Again, if it's a new player or a player who is used to a different style of play and is just getting their sea legs, so to speak, help them out. But if it becomes clear that they're beyond help or beyond wanting help and they're not receptive to your help, then again, be rid of them. You just got no time for it. I've had to deal with this in my own games where, this is why I don't have secret squirrel stuff at my table anymore, because I've had a couple of bad instances where, where a player couldn't handle the fallout of him playing as a secret squirrel character. If you are going to indulge your secret squirrel needs and it causes the other player characters in the group to be suspicious of your character, don't be surprised, because that is a reasonable outcome to a character who's sneaking away and doing their own thing all the time. But I digress. All right. Anyways, so session. This has been a good conversation. I definitely appreciate the questions and the feedback and the information. Anything else? Got about 10 minutes before I really have to call it a hard stop. So 10 minutes left. Got a few people still watching, so lay it on me. What do you need to know? What do you want to know? And that's fair. I mean, if it works for you and it works for your players, cool. I just know that I think that you and I are more on the same page than we are on different pages. I just feel that there are sort of minor nuances that's slightly different between you and I. But that's not unusual between DMs. I feel like it's really one of those things where I don't necessarily think I would be cool with being too punitive in a mechanical way. But again, it doesn't sound like that's what you're talking about. It sounds like you're talking about more story elements, and that is something that I do pretty frequently. I mean, the world exists whether the players are dragging their feet or not. So Anybody else got anything else? I think, I guess in closing remarks, play computer RPGs. They can actually inspire tabletop stuff. I know I am still planning on, for example, doing at least inspired by, not a direct conversion of, I want to throw Temple of Apshai into a game. I think it'd be fun. Yeah, I mean, it's always good to talk. I do like looking at the point. I feel like sometimes I come across as maybe a bit stuck in my ways, and that's not my intent. I'm not here to tell other people how to play their games. I have my ways about me, and everybody else does. My philosophy really is play what you like, but also let other people play what they like. And really, those two things are kind of mutually exclusive. Like, you don't get to tell people how to have fun, nor should others tell you how to have fun. But also, I mean, you're in control of your table. I feel like a lot of the advice that gets thrown around out there in the metaverse, in the universe of gaming, is often taken far too universally than it's really, I think, intended to be. I think in this day and age of talking faces on screens, it's really easy to think that the person on the screen is very specifically addressing you and speaking to you directly. And I don't really believe that that's the case. I think a lot of people who are presenting ideas, even if they're presenting them in a very direct and authoritative manner, are really doing so with the intent of being heard by those people for whom there is a receptiveness to that particular message. Not everybody is looking for advice on how to build a character or how to, 10 ways to make your dungeon better. But there are people who are. And I think it's fair to understand that. And I'm going to get up on a soapbox here for a moment from my last few minutes. I feel like it is important to remember that gaming, and more specifically D&D, has never been one thing to all people. It has never been played the same way between tables. It has never been played the same way at any given time in its history. There has never been a point in time where D&D has not been discussed and debated. And as such, I feel that it is important that we remember to approach any discussion of D&D or other games with an openness and good faith, because you and I and anybody else who's ever played any of these games has never played them the same way. We've never had the same influences. We've never had the same interests. We've never had the same intentions for our campaigns. One person might be very sword and sorcery inspired, and some other person might be very high fantasy inspired, and certainly, or weird fantasy or whatever. That really speaks more to D&D, but again, it's an easy baseline. Fantasy and Magic, for example, from the get-go, has been hotly contested as the way to do magic in D&D. Alternative magic systems are pretty much as old as the game. New classes, as old as the game. Discussions on weird character races, as old as the game. It's not a newfangled thing. It's not a new thing. What is new is that the fantasy genre has existed long enough to where there are people for whom fantasy is not what it was for you, nor is fantasy as a genre what it once was. There are so many different flavors of fantasy, and there have been so many different ways to interpret fantasy and adventure for so long now that we can't assume that there is one right way to play these games or to be inspired by this genre. And to sit there and say, well, if you want that other type of game, don't play D&D. That's also wrong, because there are old D&D worlds that are very different than the typical Grognardian Greyhawkian kind of a setting. Forgotten Realms was different, even in its old gray box version, than Greyhawk. It was a little more, it was closer and similar because D&D was more constrained at that time, but not if you had Dragon magazines or, you know, books from Roll Aids or Judges Guild who were giving you new ideas and new concepts. But Mystara, a very old D&D world indeed, is almost, it's every bit what 5th edition is now. It's a very diverse, weird, wild, wacky kind of a world in a high fantasy type of setting. So, yeah, I mean, I think it's, again, instead of going to go up on a soapbox here for a moment, and I'm kind of done. But, yeah, I mean, we're all here to enjoy the hobby. We're all here to enjoy the game. And just because somebody plays it different or goes into it wanting different things out of the game doesn't mean that they're wrong. It doesn't mean that they're against you. It doesn't mean that you are required to put them in their place, because they're in their place. They're in the place that they wanted, that they created for themselves, just as you did. You know, back in the day before we had the internet, different tables all played D&D differently. We occasionally got together when we ran into each other at school or conventions and we discussed things, or we maybe read zines. How many zines were out there expressing different ideas for how to run games and how to conduct campaigns? It's a giant, ever-evolving, never-ending, endless soup of a hobby. New ingredients get added in. Some get taken out, but you know what? They're not gone. You know, just because they're not in the main pot anymore doesn't mean that they're not in your bowl. You know, it's 5th edition is a very polarizing game. A lot of people don't like it, but at the same time, 5th edition existing doesn't stop you from playing the version of the game that you want. You already have everything you need for that, and people are still making stuff for that version of D&D. Even if you like 4th edition, there's still people making 4th edition style content. You know, I don't understand the idea that somehow the existence of one edition makes life worse for people who play previous editions. Truthfully speaking, the people who played those previous editions, while they were great hobbyists and they were dedicated hobbyists, weren't great customers. You can see the numbers and the statistics that will show that, for the most part, most people who play a game, they get to a certain point where they stop buying stuff for it because they already have enough content, enough official content, enough third-party content, and enough understanding of the game to where they can homebrew and design what they need and don't need to buy stuff from people. And so that is when companies then need to create new customers. And one of the ways that they can do this is through new editions. It's not, new editions aren't there to try and get you to buy the stuff all over again. They know that more than likely, the majority of people who played previous editions are not going to come back for the next edition. They're going to keep playing what they wanted to play. But there are always going to be new players who, if you evolve your game and change it to fit the current trends, the current style of fantasy, the current zeitgeist, for lack of a better word, which I know I'm using that word wrong, you're going to find your customer base. And that's what it's about for the companies. And this is a great point. So, and I'm going to call it on that. That's an excellent point. It's the rising tide, right? You know, rising tide lifts all ships. You know, 5th edition has probably brought plenty of other people into the hobby who then have gone on to play other games. They may not play your favorite game, but maybe they're playing other games and they're keeping the hobby diverse and alive. Anyways, thank you all for joining me here. If you are not on my Discord and participating there, I invite you to do so. In fact, I'm going to go ahead and do an invitation here. I'm going to put it right here in the comments because it's a big old lively Discord. It's, it is, well, I'd like it to be a lively Discord. There's a lot of departments there, and I'd like to have conversations and discuss things and have people share their ideas there. A couple of other pieces of news wise, I'm considering possibly starting a newsletter. I feel like that's a really good format for sharing little bits and bobs. And then the information that I collect, that I put out in the newsletter, I would probably then later on compile into a zine format that I would release over time. So that's something to look out for. But yeah, definitely had fun talking with everybody today. Certainly, yeah, not a lot of people showed up, but I do appreciate those who did. I'm likely to start doing streams with at least some frequency, even if it's every couple of weeks. I just don't, I've said it before, I don't feel like I'm somebody who has a lot to talk about. Even though I don't feel like I do. And so it's hard for me to just sit down in front of a camera and say, hey guys, I'm going to talk about this topic. I'm not one of those guys who's going to come on and go like 10 ways to make your campaign better, or are you making monsters right? That's somebody else's business. It's not my business. Anyways, I'm rambling, so I'm going to call it. Have a good one. Get out in game, and I'll maybe see you next Sunday.